I should have known something was off the second I walked into that studio. The lighting was too perfect. The audience too curated. Everyone had this giddy energy like they were in on a joke I hadn't heard yet. My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 37 years old, and I've been producing radio shows out of Portland, Oregon, for the better part of a decade. Nothing flashy, nothing viral. Just dependable content. That's what I am. Dependable. Or, at least, I was. Marissa had called it an important live recording. Said Bennett had pulled some strings to get a bigger venue. I was already sick of hearing that name, Bennett Vale, the rising podcast phenom with the smug smile and the voice that always sounded like it was selling you something. He was my wife's creative partner, which I'd started to realize was code for something else. But I went anyway, because that's what I did. I showed up. They seated me in the third row, right in the center. VIP section. A staffer with a headset even handed me a branded coffee cup with Pulp Frequency, their show, stamped in red block letters. Cute. The house lights dimmed, and out came Bennett. All shine and swagger. He opened with a few crowd pleases about being uncancelable and more analog than AI. The audience lapped it up. Then he turned toward Marissa, who was already seated on stage with a mic, legs crossed, notebook in hand like she was ready to psychoanalyze the world. She looked radiant. Too radiant. Before we dive in, Bennett said, eyes flicking to me like a lens had locked on, I want to talk about release. I frowned. So did a few others. Letting go, he continued, smiling that grin I hated. Of old habits, old identities, and sometimes, old relationships. The crowd chuckled politely. Sometimes, he added, you have to make space for what matters. Even if it's messy. Marissa laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A loud, gleeful, complicit one. My heart sank. They turned to me then, both of them, and Bennett said, Daniel, buddy, you've been with us since day one. What does legacy mean to you? My blood turned cold. This wasn't a question. It was bait. I didn't answer. I stood up instead. I took the coffee cup and placed it gently on the edge of the stage. Then I climbed the 2 steps and stood between them. The mic was live. I could hear the soft hiss of air as I spoke. You two rehearsed this, didn't you? Bennett raised his eyebrows. Marissa looked like she'd been caught in bad lighting. I kept going. Marissa and I built this life together. While she was finding herself with you in hotel rooms and budget Airbnbs, I was at home paying her health insurance. A stunned silence rippled through the room. Bennett stepped back. Marissa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. You want space, I said, turning to the crowd. Here it is. Full exposure. My wife's ending our marriage live on air, with her co-host. Gasps. Someone dropped their phone. I walked off stage. Outside, the wind hit my face like a slap. It was done. When I got home, the apartment felt like someone else had already claimed it. Our loft in the Pearl District was usually quiet after dark, but that night, it was dead. Hollow. Like the energy had already been sucked out of it, like it had exhaled me and wasn't planning to let me back in. I dropped my keys on the table and noticed 2 glasses in the sink. Both still had streaks of red wine in them. One had a lipstick stain. Marissa never wore lipstick. Not since 2019. Her tablet was still on the kitchen counter, screen dark. I tapped it, and it lit up. No password. She had always insisted we didn't need secrets between us. Irony? Anyone? The last open app was her photo gallery. I should have closed it. I should have walked away, taken the high road, started packing. But I didn't. The first image was them, Marissa and Bennett, lying on a hotel bed in robes, clinking champagne glasses. She had a flower tucked behind her ear. His hand was on her thigh. Swipe. Another one. A video this time. They were laughing, half drunk. Bennett said, per Daniel. Thinks he's got a career in AM radio. Bless his analog heart. Marissa replied, he's a placeholder. Like, technically my husband, but. She didn't finish the sentence. Just smiled into the camera and kissed his cheek. I stared at the screen until the battery died. The tablet went black. Good. I didn't want to see my own face reflected in it anyway. I walked into the bedroom and noticed something else. Her closet door was open. One of my sweatshirts, the faded navy one from our honeymoon in Astoria, was gone from the hook. In its place was a silk robe. Beige. Monogrammed. Her initials weren't on it. I didn't touch anything. I just stood there and let the quiet settle over me like dust. My hands were shaking, not from anger but clarity. There it was. The truth laid bare in a dozen small choices. This hadn't been spontaneous. This wasn't just some podcast stunt gone wrong. It had been planned. I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, and realized I didn't even know when I stopped being a husband and became a prop. For years, I kept her grounded financially, emotionally. I edited her early episodes, set up her RSS feeds, coached her through her first interviews. I believed in her voice even when she didn't. And now? Now I was just the guy with a credit card and a mailing address. A placeholder producer. I stood up, walked into the living room, and opened the windows. The air outside smelled like rain and pine. Something clean. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just made a decision. This wasn't going to end with me broken. It was going to end with her exposed. Marissa came back the next morning like she'd just stepped out to grab coffee. Keys jingling. Sunglasses in her hair. That same tote bag slung over her shoulder with the smugness of someone who never expects consequences. She saw me sitting on the couch and paused just long enough to register the tension, then smiled like nothing had happened. "Didn't expect you to still be here," she said casually, walking straight to the fridge. I watched her pull out a bottle of oat milk and pour it into her matcha mix like it was just another Tuesday. "No apology?" I asked. She didn't even look up. "For what? You crashing a live show like a psycho?" I stood slowly, my voice calm. "I saw the photos, Marissa. The videos. The hotel robe. All of it. That got her attention." Her hand froze mid-stir. Then she shrugged. "You went through my stuff? Your unlocked tablet on the kitchen counter?" I replied. "Hardly required hacking." She rolled her eyes, her face shifting into something harder. "So now you're spying on me. You staged a breakup on a podcast. In front of an audience. I think we're past the point of subtlety." She finally turned toward me, arms crossed, leaning against the counter. "Look, Daniel. This isn't working. It hasn't been for a while. You live in spreadsheets and sound waves. I live in the real world." I let out a dry laugh. "The real world, where you lie to your husband and build a new relationship in front of a microphone?" "You were boring," she snapped, the words hitting faster now. "Safe. Predictable. And yeah, maybe that used to comfort me, but now it just suffocates." I felt something shift inside me. Not sadness. Not even shock. Just detachment. I stepped closer. "You could have said any of this like a decent human being. But instead, you used me like a prop. You made my breakdown part of your brand." "You're so dramatic," she said, reaching for her drink. "This is why nothing ever evolves with you." "No," I said quietly, "this is why you think empathy is a liability." She blinked. "You didn't just cheat, Marissa. You turned our marriage into content." She held my gaze, but her eyes didn't fight back. She didn't deny it. So I nodded. "Got it." I walked into the bedroom, grabbed my duffel bag, and started packing. 2 drawers. 1 shelf. That's all I needed. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice still stuck in performance mode, not sadness, not worry. "Just curious." "Somewhere that isn't here," I said. "Somewhere you don't get to narrate the story." She followed me to the door but didn't try to stop me. When I reached for the handle, I looked back once. "You left this marriage a long time ago. I'm just finally catching up." She didn't respond. And that silence? That told me everything I needed to know. 3 days after I left, I sat across from my old college roommate, Marcus, in a tiny Vietnamese cafe just off Burnside. He still wore the same leather jacket from back in the dorms, but now he was a licensed PI with a knack for sniffing out financial deception. I pushed a folder across the table. Her name's on all our shared accounts. I want to know exactly what she's been using the money for. Marcus didn't ask why. He just opened the folder and started scanning. "You want receipts?" "Got it." Over the next 2 weeks, we built a case. Every hotel receipt tagged as creative retreats. Every studio equipment purchase shipped to an address that wasn't ours. 2 flight itineraries to LA during weekends she told me she was recording locally. And then we found the hidden account. She had been funneling part of our shared podcast royalties, the show I helped launch, into a private checking account. That account had paid for a $2,400 microphone setup. Not for her. For Bennett. She was investing in his solo project while telling me we couldn't afford a new AC unit. Marcus leaned back after the last report. "She's sloppy, but just careful enough to think she won't get caught." "She was never careful," I said, stuffing the documents back into the folder. "She was confident. She thought I'd never look." That Friday, Marissa texted me out of nowhere. "Can we talk like adults? I hate how things were left." I didn't answer. Just dropped a pin to my new rental, a furnished month-to-month in the West Hills, quiet and clean. She showed up 20 minutes late, of course. Hair down, leather jacket, like she was auditioning for the role of remorseful wife. We sat at the small kitchen table, just 2 mugs of untouched tea between us. She started in quick. Look, I know things got messy. I'm sorry you felt ambushed. But you have to admit, we were drifting. I slid the manila folder across the table. What's this? She asked, even though I saw the flicker of panic before she touched it. Evidence, I said. Receipts. Transfers. Your royalty diversions. Purchases for Bennett. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages. This is invasion of privacy, she stammered. No, I said calmly. This is accountability. She stared at the itemized statement that showed her taking $3,000 from our shared royalty account and transferring it to one called Vale Studios, LLC. This was never about drifting, I said. This was betrayal. Premeditated, funded, and documented. Her voice was a whisper now. What are you going to do with this? I stood. Whatever I need to. The divorce is happening, and it's going to be public, painful, and precise. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Not because I'd threatened her, but because for the first time, I wasn't playing the fool. And she knew it. It happened 2 weeks later, after work. I'd just finished recording an interview segment for a friend's indie podcast when I walked into the parking garage and saw a vintage cherry red convertible parked sideways across 2 spots. Door open. Engine humming. Bennett was leaning against it like a guy in a cologne ad. Arms crossed, sunglasses on, expression rehearsed. I kept walking. Daniel, he called, pushing off the car like we were about to have a bro-to-bro chat. Hey, got a sec? I didn't respond. Just unlocked my car. He stepped in front of me, hands up like I was a spooked animal. Look, I just want to clear the air. I finally looked at him. Really? In a parking garage? He shrugged. I figured you wouldn't take my call. Smart guess. He took a step closer. Marissa, she's complicated. She told me things were over between you two. I laughed once. Sharp. She also told me she was in Boston that weekend. Turns out she was in a Santa Monica hotel suite. With you. He flinched. Just a bit. Yeah. I didn't know you were still. Look, I'm not the villain here. You're just the next fool in line, I said, opening my car door. That hit him. He dropped the act for a moment, jaw tightening. She used both of us. I nodded slowly. She did. But here's the difference. I married her. You auditioned for her next season. He crossed his arms again, leaning against the side of my car now like he had a right to be there. You think you're better than me? No, I said, looking him dead in the eyes. I think you're exactly who I used to be, naive, hungry, flattered by attention that feels too good to be true. The difference is, I learned. The silence stretched. Then he smiled again, trying to crawl back into control. You don't have to make this messy, man. I stepped in, low and cold. It's already messy. You just don't get to narrate it. He stood there, rattled, no clever comeback left. Just a man in a borrowed car and a crumbling fantasy. I got in my car, shut the door, and rolled down the window. By the way, the mic Marissa gave you? I bought that. Enjoy it. Then I drove away. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. The divorce process began without fanfare. Just a sterile email from her attorney with subject line. Preliminary petition for dissolution. No apologies. No explanation. Just paperwork and line items like our marriage had been a business partnership winding down. My lawyer, Naomi Kendrick, had the kind of sharp calm you wanted in a crisis. She didn't speak in drama. She spoke in facts. You said you wanted this public, she reminded me over her walnut desk one Monday morning. That means we drop everything. The financials, the photos, the travel receipts, during mediation. No secrets. No NDAs. Are you sure? I nodded. She made it public first. She didn't flinch. Just slid a folder across the table. Then let's give them a show. Mediation was held at a sleek law office downtown with glass walls and overpriced coffee. Marissa walked in wearing a cream blazer and a steely expression like she was doing a press tour instead of dismantling a life. She didn't look at me. Her attorney did all the talking at first. Polite, clipped. We'd like to propose an amicable split of assets. Quietly. Mutually. Naomi leaned forward. My client will consider a quiet split if your client returns all diverted funds and agrees to forfeit any claim to joint royalties. Otherwise, we proceed with discovery. And full transparency. The word discovery landed hard. Marissa shifted in her chair. Her attorney glanced at her, then back at Naomi. We'll need to take that under advisement. I'm sure you will, Naomi said smoothly, tapping the folder between us. Here's a list of transactions totaling over 16,000 in misused funds. That includes equipment sent to Mr. Vale, travel expenses logged as professional development, and withdrawals from the shared business account. Marissa finally spoke. This is vindictive. I looked at her. Calm? No, this is a spreadsheet. She glared. You don't get to act righteous. You shut down my show the minute I stopped needing you. No, I said. You shut me down the moment I became less useful than Bennett. There it was. Truth stripped of poetry. She leaned back, folding her arms. You always had a talent for turning pain into performance. And you always had a gift for skipping the apology part, I said. The room went quiet. Her attorney whispered something, but Marissa held up her hand. Fine. I'll settle. I want this over. Naomi didn't blink. Then sign, and it's done. Marissa picked up the pen. Just before she signed, she looked at me, voice low and bitter. You're enjoying this. I shook my head. No. I'm surviving it. Big difference. She scribbled her name. The moment it was done, she stood and left. No handshake. No backward glance. Just silence. But as the door shut behind her, I exhaled. Not victory. Relief. Healing didn't happen in a flash. It crept in, soft and slow, in places I didn't expect. I started going to indie gigs again, tiny venues with bad acoustics and heart. The kind of places where nobody cared about production value or polish, just whether you meant what you played. I'd sit in the back with a beer, notebook open, letting melody stir something I hadn't touched in years. Then came the hikes. Quiet trails in Forest Park, muddy boots, the kind of silence that doesn't judge. I started sleeping again. Not all the time, but enough. And then, I ran into Naomi. Not my lawyer. Her sister. Marissa's. I saw her outside a record shop on Alberta Street, flipping through vinyl. I almost didn't say anything, but she looked up first. Daniel. She smiled, small and unsure. Didn't expect to see you here. Same, I said. You still collecting? She held up a worn copy of Rumors. Seems fitting. We laughed, real, unguarded laughter. First one in a while. We ended up at a nearby cafe. Not planned. Just comfortable. Over coffee, she told me she hadn't spoken to Marissa since the podcast debacle. We used to talk every week, she said, stirring her tea. Then she stopped calling. I figured I was just one more person she outgrew. I gave a tired smile. She doesn't outgrow people. She just moves on when they stop clapping. Naomi shook her head. I tried to warn her. About Bennett. About treating love like leverage. She didn't want to hear it, I said. Naomi looked up at me, serious. She's been that way since we were kids. Always chasing the next thing, the next person who made her feel seen. Never learned the difference between validation and love. That sat with me. Heavier than I expected. You were never the problem, Daniel, she added gently. She didn't break you because you were weak. She broke you because she never knew how to hold anything real. I didn't speak for a moment. Just let that settle. Thank you, I said finally. For saying that. She smiled, warm and tired. Sometimes, you need someone outside the blast radius to tell you it wasn't your fault. After that, we parted ways. No numbers exchanged. No grand promises. But I walked home lighter. For the first time since everything collapsed, I felt clarity. This wasn't about revenge. Or even justice. It was about finally understanding that her betrayal wasn't about me. It was about her. The email came on a Wednesday morning. Subject line. Just one conversation? Sender, marissa.freeman.show@gmail.com. I stared at it for a long time. Didn't open it right away. Didn't need to. The preview text was enough. I know I messed up. I just miss having someone who understood me. Can we talk? No. I didn't feel anger. No gut punch. No spiraling. Just clarity. She didn't miss me. She missed being adored. Missed the sound of her own voice bouncing off someone who used to believe in her. I clicked delete. There was nothing left to say. By then, I had already moved on in the quietest way possible. Her name is Elise. We met at a composer's meetup, small gathering in someone's converted garage with folding chairs and cheese cubes. I was showing off a new scoring draft, something ambient I'd written late one night when I couldn't sleep. She came up afterward, said my progression reminded her of rain on canvas. We talked. Nothing dramatic. No sparks flying or fate spinning. Just a calm, easy rhythm. She was a travel documentarian, the kind who didn't need to be the center of attention. She asked thoughtful questions, listened without waiting to speak. That first night, We shared a cab. She didn't ask what happened to me. I didn't volunteer it. But by the third time we met, over faux and low lights, I told her everything. Not the podcast drama, not the headlines, just the real stuff. The loneliness, the slow erasure of being with someone who only valued what you could provide. The weight of silence when love becomes branding. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she nodded. Sounds like you spent a long time being edited. That hit harder than any breakdown ever could. We never rushed into anything. It wasn't about filling space. It was about sharing it. And she never asked me to be more than what I was. Just Daniel, guy with a notebook and headphones, rebuilding. One night, a few months in, we were sitting on her balcony watching the city flicker below us. She reached for my hand. I don't want a story, she said. I just want real. I squeezed her fingers gently. Me too. We didn't kiss. Not that night. But in that silence, no stage, no scripts, no audience, I felt more seen than I had in years. There was no performance between us. No power play. Just peace. I didn't plan to drive past the old studio. It just happened. One of those unthinking turns you make when the light turns green and there's no one behind you. I hadn't seen the place since the night everything unraveled. The building looked smaller than I remembered. Faded signage. Graffiti on the far wall. A for lease sign crooked in the front window, half covered by peeling stickers from old podcast promos. I pulled over and sat there for a while, engine off. The world moved around me. Dog walkers, a skateboarder clattering by, someone pushing a stroller and talking into the air. I didn't feel bitterness. Didn't feel grief. Just stillness. That building used to feel huge. Like a place where things were made, memories, milestones, meaning. But now, it was just drywall and echoes. A set with the lights turned off. I pulled out the small notebook I kept in the glove box. Flipped to a blank page. Wrote one line. She didn't miss me. She missed being adored. I closed the notebook. That was the truth, and I didn't need to say it to her. I didn't need a final word or a clean ending. I already had it. I started the engine and drove home. Elise was already there, curled on the couch with her laptop open and headphones in. She looked up and smiled when I walked in. Not performative, not expectant, just present. Hey, she said. Hey. I replied, leaning down to kiss the top of her head. Later that night, I sat in my home office and pulled up the music scoring software I hadn't opened in weeks. A blank project stared back at me. For a while, I just let the silence hum. Then I began building something new, soft keys, low textures, the kind of theme that sneaks in rather than announces itself. I titled the track, Begin Again. Not because I wanted to do over. Not because I needed to erase the past. But because I was finally writing from a place that wasn't about holding on. It was about release. The kind that doesn't ask for applause. The kind that doesn't need to be heard by anyone else. Just me. And that was enough. D.